Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this new session of Tamkin International Talks, our global platform for the exchange of knowledge and forward-thinking ideas. We are truly honored to have with us today Professor Van Wood, an internationally recognized expert in international markets and global business strategy. The topic of today's talk is analyzing and selecting international markets for export, investment, and partnership, an especially relevant subject in today's connected, and highly competitive world. So without further ado, Professor Wood, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm going to present a good deal of materials today, and I will send these slides to my colleagues at Tomtech so they can share them with you. But once again, I'm Van Wood, and I'm a professor emeritus at Virginia Commonwealth University. And what I'm going to share with you today is a part of my major research and what I've worked with many dozens of companies in implementing for them in terms of finding international markets. So think about how you would select promising international markets. You could have unsolicited orders from overseas buyers. You go onto your web page and somebody says, "Hey, sent you a message. I saw your web page. I like your product. Could you send me one?" So you do. Suddenly you've got an international order and you're in international business. And that's good, but it's not very systematic. You also could select the closest countries to your country, to your home country, closest in terms of language, laws, and cultures. In America, in my country, in the United States, that would be Canada and Mexico. And those are two great markets, but if you think about what the United Nations, it recognizes 195 countries around the world. You've just left out 193 countries using this second method. So there's maybe a better method. Another way would be what we call random selection, which is kind of silly, kind of funny. What you would do is put a map on, let's say, on your wall, and get one of those little darts that you could throw at it, and you throw at it and say, "Oh, look, we landed on North Korea, or we landed on Sudan, or we landed on the Ukraine. That's our market." Well, that'd be, as I say, very silly because those are bad markets to begin with, and it has no systematic approach. So what I want to talk to you about is a systematic evaluation, number 4 here, of promising markets. It is a data-driven method. Okay, so you use numbers and information to make an informed decision about which markets you would like to enter. So this is a busy slide, but it represents, and I will once again, just as the Germans would say, try to grab the big gestalt. That is the big picture. Don't worry about the details here, because I will send these slides and probably a couple of little readings of articles you might find interesting to my friends at Tomkeen that you can look at later. And then if you have any questions, I give you my email on that first slide. Feel free to email me with them. But let's go though. Eliminate non-promising countries based on the golden straitjacket. I will tell you what that golden straitjacket is in a minute. And then you select promising dimensions related to market attractiveness and competitive strengths remaining in the countries under consideration. Okay? I will once again tell you why those two dimensions are very important. Number 3, select secondary dimensions related to market attractiveness and competitive strengths with the remaining countries. That is, we're taking these high level constructs about market attractiveness and competitive strengths of your company and then bringing it down to real on the ground data. Gather data on those secondary markets, and I can do this for any market in the world because we have marvelous databases in a variety of sources, particularly at places like my university, which can be accessed by people that I allow to do so. You standardize the data because we want to be able to, as you will see, to compare things across countries, such as political stability with market opportunity, 2 different constructs. How do we compare those? We need to standardize the data. To develop an algorithm or an equation to depict the results of this analysis, and that will actually give you the best countries to select. You select the markets, and then you move on to the next steps, which we won't cover today, which is these are the markets we want to enter. So let's find some strategic allies or alliances, and then we'll move into marketing strategy. And if you were taking a full course from me, we would indeed not only cover this first topic, but we would cover the second one too, the second and third. But let's move on. So imagine that you're eventually going to end up with a plot like this. You're going to have country attractiveness over here, where countries are rated as high and low. And you're going to have competitive strength, which is how does your company compare to the other companies that maybe are in this market? Do you have high competitive strengths or low? When you do that, you can place countries in here, and you can actually come up with strategies for each of those countries. Well, it might look like this. Okay, as you can see here, we have a variety of countries, including the UK, United Kingdom, Italy, Greece. Over here is Germany. And we've said that Italy has more or less mid-range competitive strengths, and and the country is very attractive. UK, Greece, Netherlands, pretty attractive. Germany, Austria, not very competitive, not very attractive. Here's another one. These are more developing markets. India looks pretty good. Indonesia looks good, etc. But the question becomes, how did we get here? How did we get here to this market? Excuse me. I've been having a bit of a cough and cold lately, so I have a small drink here I'll take. How did we get here, and how did these countries become arrayed like this? Okay. Well, we do our 7-step method. Eliminate non-profiting markets based on the golden straitjacket. Now, that golden straitjacket is a concept that was developed by the famous writer Thomas Friedman, who still writes for the New York Times, a true globalist friend of mine. And he called it MIDS, the microchip immune deficiency. And what that means is that you can eliminate markets from consideration immediately, based on, do they have this thing called microchip immune deficiency? That is, they are unable to increase productivity, unable to increase the wages of the workers, unable to increase living standards, unable to increase knowledge use, which is key to all things in life, and unable to increase their competitiveness. If this MIDS disease is not created, they will fail, such as East Germany, the Soviet Union in the past, Pan American Airlines. They all are no longer with us because they had this. So countries like the Sudan, Ukraine, North Korea, you can immediately say, I know they're not going to be good markets for us. They have this MIDS right here, not going to be good. So we can eliminate those. Well, the golden straitjacket is a way of saying, we can look at markets and narrow that 195 down to a considered set, much smaller. We don't have to. We could look at all 195, but we can look at them very quickly to say, we know that the primary engines of growth are in those markets, in those countries, low inflation and price stability. It's a big deal around the world. Strength to size is a state bureaucracy. Wealth is only created by private business. State bureaucracies, while important in terms of rules and regulations, if they are hugely based and embedded in private business, that's not so good. Maintain a balanced budget or surplus, okay? That means that particularly at your government level, do you have a surplus or a deficit? It's a big deal with my country right now. This one right here, eliminate tariffs on imports. That's something that we're struggling with, and I'll take questions about that if you'd like when I'm done. Remove foreign investment restrictions. If a government in a country says, hey, anybody can invest in our market, that tends to be good. We do that in my country. If you want to buy into our stock market, you can just go online and do that. Remove domestic monopolies. If somebody has unlimited power and they control a certain market, let's say electricity or energy, You want to say, is that really good for us? Privatize state-owned enterprises, okay? Make them public. Deregulate capital markets. Allow anybody to invest in your stock markets. Make your currency convertible. Let the market determine how strong the dollar or the yen or the euro will be. And then this is the biggie, eliminate government corruption. When you do that as a country, you have what Friedman calls the golden straitjacket. Companies around the world will look at you favorably for investments, not only in terms of exporting to your country, international business, but also foreign direct investment. So that's just a consideration to start with. Now, let's go into steps 2 through 5. Select the primary dimensions, secondary dimensions, gather the data, and standardize the data. Excuse me. My throat is still not good. Let's go through this. Now, I'm going to show you an example here. This is an example that was undertaken for the company Ford Motor Tractor Company. It's the Ford Motor Company, but it's their tractor division. They make tractors for farmers, okay? So this is just one example, but I think it will give you a good example, a good idea of how we do this. Now, what Ford did in this example is he said on this dimensions of country attractiveness, we first want to look at market size and market growth. How large is the market in that country for our tractors? If they said the market, we can sell 25,000 tractors per year, we're going to rate that very high, a 10. If it's only 5,000, not so good, we'll rate it 1. If the market's growing at 5% or more, that's a 10. If it's under 3%, that's a 1. Now, how do you get those numbers? Why 25,000 and not 1 million? Well, that's where the art and science of business come in. The science is this method. The art is having executives and managers who understand the market and can tell you a really good market would be 25,000 units, 25,000 tractors. A really poor market would be 5. Okay, how do they know that? Because they have years of experience. And what I do as a consultant or as a teacher, I would go into these companies. I would sit down with managers and say, you tell me, if you're selling tractors, what's a very good country in terms of unit sales? And they might say 25,000. Well, that's where we came up with these numbers. Now, and that's for the first 2 dimensions for country attractiveness, market size, and market growth. Number 3, Ford Motor Tractor Company chose government regulations. Is there price control? Does the government tell us how much we can charge? If there's no or none, it's a very good market. We'll give it a 10. If there's rigid controls, we'll give it a 2. Homologation is a fancy word for tariff and non-tariff barriers. So if there's no tariff barriers, you're going to move your tractors into this country and no tariffs, we're going to give that a 10. And if it's very tough tariffs, we'll give that a 2. And then local content and compensatory exports. It says basically you can bring your tractors into our market, but they have to have so much of their internal parts, the things that make up their content have to come from our country. And that's something you see all the time. But if there's none of this regulations by government, market would be a 10. And its rigid controls be a 2. Okay? And I've done whole lectures on this topic here. But because we want to move on and run through these general ideas, let me move on. Number 4, economic and political stability. Tell me about inflation. If it's under 7%, that would be a good market. If it's over 40%, not so good, bad market. It gets a rating of 1. Trade balance. That is, you have more exports than you do imports and thus hard currency to pay for my product. If you have a surplus of 5% or more, great market, give it a 10. If it's minus 36%, you have a real deficit, bad market, give it a 1. And then political stability. Okay, stable market, politics is good, no coups, no takeover of governments, no instability, great market 10. Highly unstable, we'll rate it as a 1. And just stay with me for this. Okay, now what we've done is we've selected the markets, selected the secondary. That's these. I go back. These are the primary, economic and political stability, etc. These are the secondary, inflation, trade balance, and then political stability. We've gathered the data. I can give you data on every country in the world on those dimensions. And then I create this algorithm, or what we call an equation, that says, let's actually put a number on each country that we're considering in terms of its attractiveness relative to the other country. So what Ford Motor Tractor said is that market size is going to, whatever that number was, let's say it's a 10, it would be given a 10, but market growth, if it was a 10, we think market growth is twice as important in terms of a country being attracted. So we're going to take that 10 and we're going to times it by 2. Twice as important. And then this price controls, homologation, local content, compensatory exports, they're going to be weighted by 0.25, 0.25, and 0.25. Okay? Take those numbers that we got and then weight them. And the same thing with inflation, trade balance, and political factors. Okay? Where did we get these weights of 2 and 0.25 and 0.35? Once again, the managers, that's where the art and science come in. Science is the method. This systematic approach to analyzing using data. The art is the managers having this great experience to say market growth is twice as important to us as the current market size in making a country attractive. Follow me? Okay. So here's what we've done. We've done this for through these first 5 sets, and now we're going to move on once again. Now we're going to look at this second dimension. Let me go back if I can. What we've done here, let me go back to this slide right here. We've done country attractiveness, and we have a number for each country based on all that primary and secondary dimensions. India received an 8.5, Colombia a 4.9, okay? So forward, now we're going to move on to competitive strengths. Where do we get these numbers? Where Colombia has an 8, it's quite competitive, but India only has a 5 or a 4.5. Where do we get that? Let's go back up here and take a look at what Ford did for competitive strengths. They said market share. Are we currently in the market? What was the percent of market we already have? In other words, they're already perhaps exporting to that market. Do we want to increase our exports? If we have 30% share, great market, we'll give it a 10. If we have 4% or less, give it a 1. And what's our rank? Are we the number 1 competitor in that market or number 5 competitor? Once again, giving it 1 from 10 to 2 in that case. They also put product fit. They said, this was a private study, so Ford didn't really tell the details, but basically what it says is if our tractors are compatible with the other equipment that you use tractors for, haulers, plows, tractor trailers, we're going to say it's a great market. If it's not compatible and we have to adjust our tractors, we're going to say we're not very competitive yet. And then they used an accounting term, contribution to margin. They use profit per unit. How much can we make on each tractor we sell? Excuse me again. If we can only make $5,000, if we make $5,000, great market. If we only make $1 to $100, bad market. And what's our profit as a percent of net dealer cost? If we can make 40% of what we pay a dealer, that's a great market. If we only make 5%, not so good. We're going to rate it a 1. And once again, in my lectures and my consulting work, I go into these in quite some detail. But let's consider that these are the dimensions that the primary and secondary dimensions that Ford Motor Tractor utilized to come up with a measure for each country's competitive strengths. They also use market support, which is more of just a marketing term. Do we have great distribution in these countries? If we do, it's a 10. If it's not so good, it's a 2. And market support. What do we have in terms of advertising and promotion? There's great advertising agencies and sales managers there. We're going to give that a 10. If there's really not, we'll give it a 2. Okay? Then we move into the developing of the algorithm again. Okay, and that's basically the same thing. Competitive strengths, they said absolute market share we'll weigh that by 0.5 and industrial position by 0.2, but these two together are twice as important of all of these, so we're going to times it by 2. Now, I could go into a lot of detail how they do that, but this is their algorithm that they came up with, and what they ended up with was competitive strengths, a number for each country that they had for their evoked set of countries they were going to look at. So now we have country attractiveness and competitive strengths, and we can array and say, it looks like the UK and Greece and Italy, these right up here would be our best markets, and it's based on data, not just some silly method of throwing a dart or unsolicited orders. Now, my question to you now was, would you do the same thing if you were not selling or marketing tractors, but what if you're marketing business services, such as consulting or accounting work or legal considerations? Or what if you're marketing toys for children? Would you use the same information? No. Would you use the same method? Yes. And that's what makes it a science. And that's what I've been focusing most of my research and most of my consulting on. And I'll send you this article that you can look at, explain it in more detail. But I'll go through it very quickly here. Basically, what I said is that established international business people have a cognitive framework. That is, the way they think puts information about markets in a systematic framework. Okay? And this whole thing of cognitive framework is a science that's been around for a long time. Some of you may be chess players. You play the game of chess, and you know there are grandmasters who see the board of chess differently than we, the novices. They have a cognitive framework that allows them to see 6 and 7 moves ahead. Well, I wanted to know, does that also apply to international business people? And so I did a study, or I've did many studies around the world to say, if I tap into international business people's cognitive structures, and then I tap into people that are business people but have no international experience, are the way they view the world in terms of analyzing markets the same? And so I came up with, this is a graphic of the way cognitive structures work. There's 6 broad constructs, environmental dimensions. They're broken down into 17 information levels and then 60 judgmental decision barrels. I'll come and explain this and make sure you understand all of that. So what are these big 6 dimensions that I theorized? One was, again, politics. That's the big dimension. Politics would be this first circle here, and then the 3 information levels below it would be stability, diplomatic relations, and internal policies towards private enterprise. Okay? And what about the second one? The second bubble is environmental dimensions, which are made up of also 3 information levels. Let's look at those. Market potential. I explained it here, and I said it's really made up of general demand for my type of product, adaptation costs, that is, do I have to adapt my product or service to that market, and the level of competition. As you see, there's 1, 2, 3, and one major dimension. Let's go back. Here's number 3. Once again, it has 3 subdimensions. And it's called economic accomplishments. Okay? Development and performance is measured by, tell me about the GNP, the US dollar reserve, the education level, the employment level. That's development and performance. Tell me about production strengths. Do you use modern methods in natural resource level? And tell me about consumption, ownerships per capita, food consumption, energy consumption. That's number 4. And as you can see, if we go back to this framework, there's number 4 or number 3, and it had 3. The 4th one was cultural perspective, because culture is always important in terms of being successful in a market. You do need to understand how people value things. What are their value structures? How are they different than you? How do I advertise it to them? What kind of product features would they like? So I want to know about cultural unity, the degree of ethnic and cultural differences in that export market, and cultural differences within that market. That is, how different, in my case, I'm from the U.S., or how different are they from business practices as seen in America? Numbers, colors, shapes, and sizes. And once again, there's only 2 there. So we go back here, and we see culture, big construct, has 2 concepts, and we've identified those. Number 5 was infrastructure. Okay, tell me about physical distribution. Do they have air, land, and sea shipping? Tell me about their communication: email, internet, fax, commercial media, trade fairs, etc. And geographic and climate conditions. I want to know about harbors, natural disasters, that type of thing. Once again, big construct, 3 concepts below it, and you can see number 5. Sorry, too far. Number 5 had 1 big environmental dimensions with 3 sub dimensions called concepts. And then finally, the 6th one, as you will see, had 3, which we call legal perspective. Once again, tell me about tariffs and taxes, non-tariff barriers, and other legal considerations. And there we have our framework. 6 environmental dimensions, 17 information levels. Okay? Now, the reality is, if you think about it, there are also these 60 judgmental decision variables that are tied directly to each information level and tied to 6 dimensions. That is the cognitive structure of advanced international business people that exist today. And I'm not going to go through this, but I'll tell you that stability had 4 things that you could measure. Diplomatic relations had 2. Internal policies had 3. Same thing with general market potential, general demand, adaptation costs. These things over here, specific decision variables, I can get numbers. I can get information on each one of those using my access to my databases and library research materials that I specialize in. Same thing here with market potential, economics, etc. Same thing with culture, and same thing with infrastructure, and same thing with legal consideration. There are 60 in total. So once again, let me go back just to make sure. Once again, I want you to grab the big picture. 6 broad dimensions broken into 17 information levels, and then broken into 60 decision variables that I have measured many, many times in Europe, in the States, in Asia. And here's what I found. Experienced business people indeed manifest this cognitive structure. There's a whole series of lectures I could give you on how I measured that. Believe me, it exists in their mind. Among non-internationalists, non-individual business people that don't have a great deal of experience in the international arena, it didn't exist. And here's what they told me. The primary dimension of importance is market potential. Thus, when you build your algorithms, those dimensions that you measured related to market potential receive higher weights. They influence which countries are more attractive. Number 2 was legal. Is it a rule of law there? Number 3 was politics. Is it stable there? Number 4 was infrastructure. That is, they have harbors and airports and the internet and communications. Number 5 was economics. Are they growing? Do they have a middle class? Are they educated? And interesting to me, number 6 was culture. That is, the least important dimension was culture. That is, knowing about the values and the things that drive consumers to buy things or business people to buy things was the least important of all the other 5. And what I did is I thought about that. And the thing is that what culture is very important. I cannot emphasize, if you're going to go into a market, if you're, let's say, in the Moroccan market and you want to come to the United States, learn about the United States. What do we value? What kind of ethnic groups do we have? Tell me about your consumer behavior there. Absolutely critical. But first, the potential must be there. Rule of law must be there. Political stability must be there. There must be this infrastructure in place, and it must be growing and dynamic. Then tell me about culture. And that's how we ended up with this final selecting most promising international markets to enter. So then the question of, if you were not marketing tractors but toys or something else, would you use the same information? No. Would you use the same method? Yes. What information would you use? If you wanted, I could come as your consultant. We could sit down and build this framework, build this whole way of approaching it, go through these 8 steps and wind up with the most promising markets for you. And then we would go into the strategic alliance and resource expenditure strategy, marketing strategy that would be best for you. And you would be much more successful. Thank you for your kind attention. I will move on from there and say that's what all I had for today. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Professor Wood, for this rich and insightful presentation. Yes, we have some questions. We will now move to the Q&A session. I will read out the question if you need me to. Yes, we have a first question from Nuhaila, who asked, what are the key criteria you recommend using when evaluating the attractiveness of a foreign market?
What are the key considerations for selecting a attractive market? And did I get that question right?
Yeah, it said, what are the key criteria you recommend using when evaluating the attractiveness of a foreign market?
Right here. Once again, right here. You give me information on the market potential there, the legal structure there, is it rule of law? You give me information on the political stability there. You give information on infrastructure, economics, and culture. And each one of these, if you recall, each one of these is quite complex. It's going back here. It's really this cognitive structure, broad dimensions, broken down into subdimensions, and then finally these 60 judgmental decision variables that I can collect data on and build this model. So when we get here, indeed, go through all this, you end up with, well, let me go all the way back. You end up with knowing exactly why Italy and UK and Greece and Ireland were selected as the best markets. You know exactly why, because you have this criteria. You've gone through a data-driven method that leads you through these 8 steps. And I think you can, at the end of the day, business, because we have no crystal ball, we cannot see the future. So, and that's what makes life so fascinating. Believe me, if I had a crystal ball, I'd be rich and famous now, because I would know who won the horse race yesterday and who won the presidential election and what markets are going to move up and down. And I would be living on my private island, but I don't. But so what we do is we use data in a systematic way to understand where we're going to make decisions, which markets we're going to be into, where we're going to invest our resources. That's why we do this. It's not just pretend. It's the best way to, as we say in American English, to hedge your bets, to say, we truly believe that Italy, Ireland, Greece, and UK are the best markets for, in this case, Ford Motor Tractor Company, and this is why. And then we as a company get together and say, are we ready to go? And we pull the trigger. That is, we invest our resources and the market will tell us if we're right. And most of the time, you're right. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. We have a second question from Shayma, who said, what role do local partnerships play in reducing the risk associated with the FDI?
Great question. Great question. Let me go back to the very last slide here. Next step, strategic alliances. You know, the strategic alliance is a fancy way of saying who's your partner overseas, okay? Who's going to be your agent? Who's going to be your representative? And what are the qualities? And I have a whole series of lectures on how to select a strategic ally. You know, you need a partner. I don't care if you're the largest company in the world or a single person entrepreneur company. You're going to need a strategic partner overseas, one that understands, you know, the lay of the land, you know, one that understands how things work there. You know, you understand kind of the big picture of the market, but you need somebody to guide you on a daily basis. And that's, you need to select a strategic ally or allies. And how do you find them? There's all sorts of ways to do that, all sorts of criteria to select allies. Many government agencies in my country and other countries help our businesses do that. I've worked with a lot of countries in selecting a strategic ally. And it's I can't, there's a whole series of lectures on how to do that, but great question, absolutely critical. Once you have the markets, then you grab it, you find the allies. And once you feel comfortable with those allies that are on your side, that are going to represent you, then you're ready to really implement your, what I call resource expenditure strategy, fancy way of saying marketing strategy. Okay. What products are we going to put in that market? How are we going to promote them? How are we going to distribute them? How are we going to price them? Okay. And how would this change over time? That's the whole dynamics of the marketing discipline, which is my specialty. But that breaks it down to, you know, the whole thing called international business, which is really complex, that can be understood. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Next, yes, we have two other questions. Next question, do digital technologies or e-commerce change the traditional approach to market selection and entry mode?
That was, I mean, what role does e-commerce play?
Yeah, do digital technologies or e-commerce change the traditional approach to market selection?
No, I mean, well, does e-commerce change the traditional approach? No, you still use the same methods. Okay. If somebody came to you and your company, let's say in Morocco, and you've decided that you're going to export your products to the US, Canada, and England, let's say I want to invest in your company, either as a stockholder or simply just an investor. I want to give you money to bump your ability to move and shake in those markets up. I'm going to ask you, do you know about the political stability of these markets? Do you know about the market potential? Do you know about the legal structure? Do you know about the culture? I want to know what you know. So the approach is the same. What e-commerce does is it gives you another tool to be very effective to not only reach those markets, but to distribute to those markets. You know, in other words, e-commerce, really is in the realm of resource expenditure strategies. To what degree am I going to build e-commerce structure, platforms, web pages, e-promotions that I'll be sending out to customers? You know, how am I going to be using e-commerce and e-promotions to do that. And what's really interesting in today's time, and I think for all, young people in particular, but all managers, is that not just the internet and e-commerce, but now we have AI, artificial intelligence, that's going to change not the use of this method, but everything about how we approach this method. I can use AI to do this analysis where it used to take me a week or so to go into the databases and pull out the information. I can do it now in a couple of hours. That's how fast it is using AI. It changed the speed of everything. Now you still have to go back and check what AI, be it GPT or Google's platform or whatever. You still have to go back and do your own homework on it, because there are these mistakes that AI, that we call hallucinations, do. But AI is not going away. They often say that you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job, excuse me, to someone that knows how to use AI. That's the future. But it lies down here in this resource expenditure strategy. You can use AI and the internet to help you do this, but eventually you're going to use it in the actual implementation of your strategies. Hopefully that helps.
The last question: Are there specific Are there specific analytical tools or methods you recommend for international market screening and segmentation?
Yes, I recommend this 7-step approach. Now you can give it different labels. You can call these dimensions differently. They don't have to be market attractiveness or competitive strength. But if you see what we've done, what we've done is we've taken a massive amount of information. We've taken this cognitive structure that looks like this, with giant constructs here, but broken down into concepts and then into information levels, that judgmental decision variables that we can actually collect data on, put it into a data-driven method, and actually come up with systematic approach to finding promising markets. That's what smart business people do. Okay? I'm not saying you have to use this. If you don't use this method, you might not be successful. No, maybe you get lucky. Maybe it just works out for you. But if you don't know this stuff, if you don't have this way of thinking, and that's really why you go to school and get an education, it gives you methods and tools and theories to think by. And this is one of them. In the international business arena, this is very important. So I recommend these 8 levels. And what I'll do is I will send Tamkin my slides and a couple of articles. If you're interested, you can read further on this. And you have my email address that I will, that you have if you go all the way back. Let me go back to, back to, there's my email address there, vr1@vcu.edu. You can send me your questions there. So it's been my pleasure to be with you. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming. I'd be happy to, I'm going to be in Africa in next week. I'll be in the Ivory Coast with Dr. Kadili and other colleagues at a conference in Abidjan and Yamoussoukro. I've been in your beautiful country of Morocco many times, and other places around the world. I've had the pleasure of visiting 111 countries in the world. And someday maybe we will cross paths in person. I hope so. But in the meantime, I wish you all, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you once again, Professor Wood, for sharing your valuable insights with us today. To all our attendees, and thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again at our future session of Temkin International Talks. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Be well, everyone.